the allergies and other health issues that we might face, or that we generally face around this time of year. Particularly regarding if you happen to live in a wooded area where there are a lot of ticks. Ticks are flourishing in the fall, and there's some new information about ticks. So hopefully we'll get to that today. We've got a lot to get to. But first, let's talk about the main feature for today's show, which is illness in mind, the nocebo effect. Now, we've been talking about mind over medicine techniques, how the mind can cure you, and how the placebo effect shows us how powerful the mind is in healing not just minor illnesses, but people who have, eradicated cancer just through the power of the mind. And in many cases, they were believing they were taking a drug of some kind that was curing them. But there are other documented and scientifically sound, and I want to emphasize that because everything I'm telling you about is scientifically sound and comes from, peer-reviewed research. So, to avoid the appearance of charlatanism, if you will, all of this is verified fact. So we're going to talk about we have been talking about the placebo effect and how the mind can make you well. Well, we're going to talk about now how the mind can make you ill. Because illnesses, scientific evidence shows us that illnesses quite often come from the illness of mind. And in a broader sense, talking about the illness in mind reminds me of what we were just talking about in the case of Charlottesville. I think people recognize the illness in mind that this extreme hatred is. And they see its effects. And the way you deal with illness in mind is by changing the perspective. And the way that you change the perspective, and this is something that we can all do collectively, is to, in a meditative state, envision the world as it really actually is, which is the world of connected people all who are one. People who take different aspects, look different, but work together and support each other. And no one feels threatened or left out. That's what really came home to me, by the way, when I heard these protesters. And one of the things they kept repeating, one of their big mantras was, and this had to do with Jews, and they were saying, Jews will not replace us. And that was so telling. When I first heard it, I just thought it was, sort of Nazi-style rhetoric. But then I thought about it, and that's what they're concerned about. They really feel they're being displaced. They're feeling like there's no place in the world for them, or that they're being pushed out, and they're pushing back because they feel like they're being pushed out. And it certainly is possible that, and I'm sure that there's legitimate reasons that they feel that way. Among a lot of people, and I will admit to it myself, my first, reaction to that is, well, too bad for you. Welcome to our world. those of us who have spent centuries being pushed out, uh, and being pushed out by um, your relatives. Uh, but then when I took that step back and looked at it from the higher perspective, I realized that the way to help them, the way to change this, is to envision a world where they don't feel threatened, but they feel embraced. They feel like they are going to be okay. They're going to be taken care of. That the future and the changes, including the changes that are involved in a global world, the changes that are involved living in a multicultural world, aren't so scary, and in fact are beneficial and are going to bring amazing benefits to them. They need to be shown that. But I think the way that we can begin to do it is just to have a hold of vision of that in meditation and prayer, if you will. And in fact, it's another symptom of illness in mind that is fueling a lot of the fears around the world, right? I mean, obviously we have President Trump in this country, but we have other countries in Europe that are going through a real reactionary phase. They're pulling back. They don't want to be part of a global economy. So you have things like Brexit happening, and they're basically scared about what this is evolving into, and so they're pulling back. They're pulling back in a way that is, detrimental, certainly, and pretty much futile, because this is what is going to happen. We are a global species, whether we like it or not, and we all are dependent upon one another around the world. That is the truth of who we are. But all of a sudden, people were not so comfortable with this, connectedness, and all of a sudden, separation, which they become used to, the illusion of that, seemed to be fading, and so to hide behind that wall of perceived separation seems like the safest thing to do when you're facing changes that you don't know how they're going to affect you. And this is not to negate other sufferings. I understand that people are going through really tough times because of the larger effects of globalization and all of those things. But the opportunities that it presents to everyone, particularly those who are being challenged, with changes in their job and how they can make a living, the opportunities that they have now to change and grow are amazing. So what I'm saying in all of these aspects is the best thing that we can do is hold in mind a vision of that world that is safe and supportive of everyone, and where everyone feels like they are being heard and that they are being taken care of and that they are going to be okay. That nobody's trying to replace them or take something away from them that they deserve. No one is trying to take food out of their mouths, because that is the truth. Although it might seem to be something else. My goodness, and here I go rolling on. I got to get to our full effect. Is the effect of the mind healing itself through a medicine that really has no um, active ingredient or scientifically uh, understood ingredient, then the nocebo effect is the effect of attention on illness, excessive knowledge about what can go wrong with the body, and how that actually harms you. The more you focus on the infinite ways in which the body can break down, the more likely you are to experience physical symptoms. So the nocebo effect demonstrates the power of negative belief. So while placebos demonstrate the power of positive thinking and nurturing care and hope, and are traditionally prescribed to help patients feel better, the term nocebo, and in Latin it translates literally from Latin to "I shall harm." This term it was introduced to sort of differentiate the pleasing effects of placebos from the harmful effects inert treatments can induce. So, for instance, if a patient is in a trial and they're given a pill that will relieve their pain, that's a placebo. And there's a good chance that pain will go away, even if it's not a real pill, it's just a sugar pill. But if you warn them that the treatment could cause nausea or vomiting, there is a high likelihood that they'll experience those symptoms, even though they're not getting any real drug that would actually cause that physically. Their belief in that is what causes it. So you can see how powerful belief is. There's one study that shows patients in a control group for a new chemotherapy were given nothing but saline, so that's a placebo there. But they were warned that it could be chemotherapy, and 30% of them lost their hair. Just because they thought it was chemotherapy. It wasn't. It was saline. Another study, hospitalized patients were given sugar water and told it would make them throw up, and 80% of them vomited. 80% of them. Then there's another study on asthmatics who inhaled a harmless saline solution after being told it contained irritating allergens, and not only did they wheeze and feel short of breath, their bronchi actually constricted. So physically they had the effects of an allergy that they weren't exposed to. And those who experienced full-blown asthma attacks found relief when they were dosed with the same inert solution and told it would help them. Another study showed that more than 3/4 of people who thought they were getting an antihistamine but were actually getting a placebo got drowsy. And when study participants were told that the anesthetic nitrous oxide, which normally relieves pain, would cause pain, it did. Even thoughts of death, about death, seem to play out, apparently. For instance, according to Dr. Herbert Benson from Harvard, surgeons are wary of people who are convinced that they will die. There are examples of studies done on people undergoing surgery who almost want to die to recontact a loved one. Close to 100% of people under those circumstances do die. Patients about to undergo surgery who were convinced of their impending death were compared to another group of patients who were merely unusually apprehensive about death. And while the apprehensive bunch fared pretty well, those who were convinced they were going to die usually did. Similarly, women who believed they were prone to heart disease were 4 times more likely to die. Not because these women had poorer diets, higher blood pressure, higher cholesterol or stronger family